I wake to the sound of air reciting its prayers. It comes through the venting shafts above my cot, a slow, endless whisper, like breath passing through teeth. It is the first sound I hear each cycle, and I have come to think of it as a kind of blessing. The hiss and pulse of the hive's lungs mean that the emperor still breathes through his creation. They say he sits upon the golden throne, immobile, unseen. But I have always believed his breath finds its way even here into the pipes, the ducts, the endless metal veins of Hive Karthane. The air is cold this morning. Moisture beads on my lashes as I rise. The walls of my cell glisten like the insides of a lung, wet and pulsing faintly with machinery beyond. Every surface smells faintly of oil and sanctified rust. I wash in the condensation that drips from the ceiling, each drop catching the lumen light like tiny relics. The water tastes of copper and dust, but it is permitted, and that is all that matters. I begin the day's first litany, the canticle of circulation, tracing the sign of the cog across my chest. Blessed be the air that moves through man, and the emperor who breathes through all things. Each syllable fogs the air before me, visible for a heartbeat, then gone. My words vanish into the drone of the ventilation system, absorbed by its rhythm. No echo, no reply. Only that soft inhalation, like the hive itself, is listening. I dress in the robes of my order gray with a single stripe of white down the arm to mark me as a scribe of atmospheric accounting. The fabric smells faintly of disinfectant and smoke. My stylus, worn smooth from years of contact with prayer oil, hangs from a cord around my neck. I take it in my hand the way others might take up a weapon. The corridor outside my cell is narrow, lit by flickering lumen strips that hum faintly, a second heartbeat beneath my own. Every surface is metal, yet it feels organic, ribbed, sweating, alive. I can almost imagine I am walking through the throat of something vast and dreaming. There are few others awake this early. The shift priests prefer to begin before the masses stir, before the heat rises and the stench of humanity becomes unbearable. I nod to a passing adept who carries incense burners shaped like miniature turbines. Neither of us speak. To waste breath before the day's quota is tabulated would be irreverent. Among juniors there's a superstition. A loop of red-tied twine on a vent grate keeps you from being misfiled by the hive. I do not believe it, but I keep a length in my robe all the same. The lift shaft descends with a sound like a drawn-out sigh. I watch the stratolights pass one by one through the grate, 41st, 42nd, 43rd. By the 70th, my ears ache from the pressure change. By the 73rd, the walls are so damp that beads of water slide down the inside of the car. Here, in the lower lungs, everything is damp, slow, and devotional. The air reclamation engines stretch beyond sight, their turbines spinning with the patience of saints. This place was built before my grandparents were born, perhaps before the hive itself knew its name. We are merely the latest hands to serve its breath. Adept Han awaits me at the control dais. His robes are darker than mine, the color of old blood. He does not greet me. Instead, he gestures silently toward the data pulpit where the flow indicators burn a steady green. I take my position beside him. Together, we intone the opening benediction of pressure regulation. Our voices blend with the rumble of machinery. It feels as if the hive itself is answering. Flow remains steady. Han murmurs when the litany ends. His voice is dry, like parchment scraping against metal. Cycle efficiency at 98.2. The saints are merciful. Praise their continuity, I reply. We fall into our routines, checking valve sanctity seals, anointing gauge lenses with blessed oil, documenting every whisper of imbalance. The servitors that hang from the upper gantries twitch occasionally, releasing faint clouds of vapor from their open mouths. They are human, no longer lungs replaced by filters, hearts by compressors. Their slow exhalations fill the air with warmth. Each of them bears a name. The one nearest to me, its skin stretched tight and translucent across augmetic ribs, is called Saint Arion, reclaimer of breath. I press my gloved hand to its chest. The rhythmic pulse beneath feels almost tender. When it exhales, my visor clouds with moisture, and for one impossible instant, I imagine that it sighs weary, grateful, alive. Lunch cycle comes late. The hive's internal chronometers stutter for a moment, throwing the lumen patterns out of rhythm. We eat beneath the drones of cooling fans. The nutrient paste is pale gray, tasting faintly of old iron. I chew with care. I was taught to never eat quickly. Breath is sacred, and the act of drawing it between bites honors the Emperor's infinite patience. Across from me, Han speaks between measured mouthfuls. They say the upper manufactoria have petitioned for increased air rations. By whose decree, I ask? Unclear. Probably the planetary governor's auditors. The skyborn always think themselves short of breath. He smiles faintly, a dry, papery curl of the lips. Let them choke on their own arrogance. We do not laugh. Humor is rare here. After the meal, we resume our vigil. The reclamation sector stretches for kilometers, the ceiling lost in darkness and mist. Every sound echoes, the metallic click of a valve, the cough of a servitor, the hiss of steam escaping from a cracked joint. I take comfort in the repetition. Each act is both ritual and function, both service and prayer. The administratum teaches that precision is the highest form of worship, and so I measure the flow rates as though I were weighing souls. Then something changes. A faint shudder passes through the deck, too subtle for alarm but enough to stir unease. The lumen above me flickers once, twice, then steadies. I note the disturbance on my slate, but my hand hesitates. For an instant, I imagine the shudder as a breath not mechanical, but alive. The next sound is softer still, a low hum, like chanting through static. I pause, turning my ear toward the ductwork. There it is again. Distant, melodic, a pattern hidden beneath the mechanical rhythm. I glance at Han. He has not noticed. His stylus continues its sacred scratching, unbroken. The hum fades. When it does, the air feels heavier, thicker, as if something vast has inhaled and not yet exhaled. I record the anomaly in the day's log under atmospheric aberrations. Category minor. Evening comes slowly here, marked not by sun, but by a change in the hum of turbines. As the hive descends into rest cycle, the flow lessens, the vents quiet, and the silence feels almost holy. I remain at my station longer than required, transcribing flow variances and minor seal leaks. The repetition soothes me. My stylus glides through lines of numerals and prayer fragments until my hand cramps. I could do this forever. When I finally rise, my knees ache. The servitors above sway faintly in the still air. They're breathing slower now, more human. I extinguish the altar's lumen one by one until only a single light remains, one that flickers. Undecided. It stutters like a soul on the edge of belief. I linger, watching its rhythm. There is beauty in its struggle to remain, in that fragile glow against the dark. Han calls it inefficiency. I call it faith. The lift carries me back toward my quarters. As it climbs, the walls creak and sigh. Every noise echoes upward through the strata, until it feels like the hive itself is whispering its own name in the dark. I reach my quarters after 16 hours awake. The cot looks small, almost afraid beneath the dim lumen. I sit at the desk and open the day's ledger. The parchment glows faintly blue from the rune light. My hand hesitates before the first line. I want to write what I felt, that the air seemed alive, that the vents sang. But such words are not sanctioned. So instead I write, flow consistent, efficiency preserved, no irregularities of note. I stop, stare at the ink, and then perhaps foolishly add a final note in smaller script. The hive breathes. I seal the entry with a drop of oil, black and viscous. It spreads slowly across the paper, veins of darkness sinking into the fibers. The smell fills my nostrils, sharp, metallic, reverent. Before extinguishing the lumen, I press my ear against the wall. The hum has returned. Softer now, almost tender. I close my eyes, and in the spaces between the machine's pulse, I hear words distant, blurred, like voices through static. Breathe for him. Breathe until he hears. My lips move before I can stop them. I am breathing. I whisper. I am breathing for him. The walls seem to sigh an answer. Somewhere deep below, the hive exhales. And I, its smallest lung, breathe back. And so I did. Unverified Vox anomaly, categorized as mechanical distortion. No impact on function. That word again, function. It appears in every record, every edict, every prayer. It is our faith made measurable. But I have begun to wonder whether the word describes the hive or us. When the shift finally ended, most adepts lingered rather than returned to their cells. The corridors felt narrower, the air heavier, and to walk alone was to invite the weight of the hive onto your shoulders. Someone suggested an unscheduled hymn, an improvised recitation of sustained pressure. We stood in a circle around a broken lumen, voices overlapping until the sound became a low drone. I kept my eyes closed and imagined that if I sang precisely enough, the machinery would match my rhythm. For a moment, it did heat turbines echoing our tone, breath aligning with steel. It felt like communion. Then the harmony slipped, and the engines growled, and the moment broke. Harn dismissed us with the usual benediction. Function endures. Sleep if you must. The hum of the reclamation engines changed today. Not in volume, not in rhythm, only in tone. A fractional shift, like the pitch of a choir one note lower than the day before. It should mean nothing. It means everything. I marked the variance in the logbook. Acoustic deviation, 0.0, 2 cycles below baseline. Source unknown. Prayer inspection pending. Adept Harn signed it without looking. His hand shook as he pressed the seal. Perhaps he too heard it. The air tastes different. The filters used to smell faintly of sanctified oil, but now there's a sweetness beneath the metal, an over-rich scent that clings to the tongue. When I breathe too deeply, my teeth ache. The metrics insist oxygen levels are unchanged, yet the flesh disagrees. The Vox chimes rang twice before dawn, summoning all sector scribes to emergency conclave. The corridor outside the dormitories was filled with the sound of recitation. Hundreds of adepts whispering correction litanies as they walked, like a tide of murmured numbers. The light was dimmer than usual, tinted the color of old parchment. Every lumen seemed to hesitate before shining. At the dais stood Senior Prefect Marnes, a man whose voice carried more static than breath. "Praise be to function," he said. "Praise be," we answered. "There is no failure, only deviation," he intoned, eyes closed. "There is no loss, only recalibration. Breathe these truths, and the hive shall breathe with you." He announced that the upper manufactoria reported minor atmospheric thinning workers collapsing at their stations, lungs fluttering like torn valves. Official cause: negligent filtration. Counter directive: increase reclamation tempo by 2% and extend duty cycles until stability returns. 2%. That's small. That vast. After the meeting, Han told me quietly. The prefect's Vox stuttered halfway through. "Did you hear it?" His syllables caught like gears. "I heard only obedience," I said, though the echo of that stutter still vibrated in my skull. We descended once more to the Saints. The reclamation hall was louder than before. The turbines screamed when they turned, metal shrieking against metal, the sound echoing up through the duct spires like the voice of a wounded god. The pressure gauges blinked erratic green, then amber, then back again. Undecided. Our first act was the litany of adjustment. Han led. I followed. Pressure rise, praise be rise. Pressure fall, praise be fall. In the balance of the Emperor's lungs we are kept. Each line was punctuated by a twist of a valve or a pull of a lever. Every gesture a word in the great machine's grammar. The servitors did not move with their usual grace. Their chains creaked as they inhaled, a staggered rhythm, as if they were forgetting the melody. One coughed a dry, clicking noise like a gear stripped of teeth. A fine dust sprayed from its mouth and settled on my hands. I wiped it away and found my gloves powdered gray. We checked the filters. Half were clogged with what looked like ash, though no fires had been reported. The texture was soft, fibrous, organic. I recorded the finding precisely. Filter obstruction, 32%. Composition unknown. Cause presumed civic detritus. Civic detritus, Hahn repeated. His voice was calm, but his eyes lingered on the dust until the lids trembled. People breathe. People die. Perhaps the hive reclaims them faster now. He smiled at his own grim humor. I did not. By mid-cycle, the pressure imbalance deepened. Vox reports came in bursts of static. Factories above shutting down, hab blocks sealing their vents. Some channels carried nothing but panting, like wind trapped inside lungs. Hahn ordered me to remain at my console and continue the readings. Stability is faith, he said. Do not let uncertainty become sin. So I stayed. My stylus moved across parchment even as the alarms began to blink. The rhythmic act of writing steadied me, the soft scrape of nib on vellum like a rosary of sound. Each figure entered was a heartbeat restored to order. The data made no sense. Intake pressures fluctuated faster than human breathing. The system's compensators should have corrected it, but instead they looped endlessly through diagnostics. Each failed attempt triggered the next like a choir misreading the same verse. I recalculated, cross-checked, prayed. The numbers still screamed. At 19th hour, the vox crackled again. A woman's voice, unknown rank, whispered through the interference. Do not increase the tempo. You're feeding it. You're feeding it. Then silence. I asked Hahn if we should report the transmission. He looked at me with that weary parchment face. If we cannot identify the speaker, she did not exist. Log it as noise. Sleep. The word meant less with each cycle. I returned to my quarters through passageways lined with condensation. Every droplet reflected the lumen light in miniature, tiny stars trapped in the damp. I brushed a hand along the wall, the moisture smeared into streaks like ink. Somewhere within the pipes, a rhythmic tapping echoed my footsteps exactly. Half a pace delayed. When I reached my door, the tapping stopped. Inside, the air was stale. The vent above the cot emitted only a faint wheeze. I cleaned the grate with a devotional brush, whispering the blessing of flow. But the air did not improve. My lungs ached as though the hive had forgotten to breathe for me. I wrote my daily report anyway. Cycle duration. Extended per directive. Reclamation output. Increased by 2%. Flow irregularities. Persistent but manageable. Faith quotient. Steady. The final line came unbidden. The hum is lower now. It feels closer to the heart. I sealed the entry, doused the lumen, and lay awake listening to the machine's slow, uneven breathing. I dreamed of pressure. Not the kind that crushes or suffocates, but the kind that waits an invisible weight behind the walls. Patient. Eternal. In the dream, I stood inside a glass lung, and the entire hive inhaled around me. The sound was endless. Until it wasn't. I woke, gasping. The lumen strips above my cot had gone dark. Only the red rune of the air monitor pulsed faintly. The vent was silent. No hiss, no hum. Just a stillness that felt wrong. I held my breath and counted. 10 seconds. 20. Then, with a sound like a heart restarting, the airflow returned, weak and uneven. Relief and fear arrived together. When I reached the reclamation hall, half the adepts were missing. Their absence was noted but not discussed. Those who remained worked twice as fast. Robes soaked with condensation, lips moving in silent litanies. The temperature had risen by several degrees. Mist clung to the floor, smelling faintly of ozone and rot. Adept Han stood at the altar, surrounded by a dozen open data slates. His hands trembled as he scrolled through them, lines of red script warnings cascading across the screens. 3 lower sectors report atmospheric dropout, he said. No response from maintenance crews. Prefect Marnus has elevated our status to sanctified emergency. We are to continue all recitations and increase extraction by another 2%. I hesitated. Sir, that may. Do not finish that thought, scribe. His tone was gentle but final. Faith is obedience. The numbers will find their way home. He turned away before I could answer. The servitors were less obedient. Their respiration cycles no longer synchronized. The entire hall sounded wrong, like an orchestra tuning to different keys. Some hung limp, twitching occasionally, expelling bursts of air that smelled of burnt copper. I performed the hymn of restoration on each one, tapping the copper chimes that hung from my belt, waiting for the blessed return of rhythm. None came. One servitor, designation AER-17, exhaled a puff of gray that coated my mask. I wiped it clear and saw faint motes glimmering in the light like ash made of glass. It drifted upward, drawn into the vents. When I checked its data plate, the reading was impossible. Inhalation cycle 0. Exhalation cycle continuous. It was breathing out without breathing in. I documented it with steady hand, though my pulse raced. Subject AER-17 displays unilateral respiration. Possible valve failure. Deactivate per litany of closure. Han read the entry and nodded. Together we performed the rite. The servitor's eyes dimmed. The silence that followed felt larger than the hall itself. By mid-cycle, the Hive began to speak, not through voices, but through its machines. The Vox lines carried a constant low murmur, a static like distant chanting. At first it was ignorable. Then words began to form, half-familiar fragments of our own litanies. Pressure rise, praise be rise. The phrase looped endlessly, warped and layered over itself, until it sounded like 1,000 adepts whispering from the ducts. When we shut down the Vox link, the words persisted. Is it echo? I asked. Han did not answer. He stared into the dark between the turbines, his lips moving without sound. Later, Prefect Marnus arrived in person. He was carried on a palanquin fitted with rebreather tubes that pulsed in and out of his chest like translucent worms. His skin had gone the color of wax. Rejoice, adepts, he croaked through the Vox synth embedded in his throat. The Emperor tests us through scarcity. Each breath denied to the unworthy is a breath preserved for him. He raised one hand, skeletal beneath his sleeve. Commence the grand litany of overdrive, triple tempo, double yield, salvation through function. A hush followed. Even the turbines seemed to pause. Triple? Han whispered when Marnus had gone. The metal will melt at that speed. Then it will melt in his name, I said before realizing I'd spoken aloud. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Something the Hive itself had breathed through me. The overdrive began at the 18th hour. The turbines screamed like beasts flayed alive. Steam burst from the ducts, scalding the nearest adepts. The air thickened until it shimmered. The lumen strips turned orange, then red, then failed entirely. Through the noise, the servitors sang. It was not music, not even human sound, but rhythmic exhalations that rose and fell in perfect time with the engines. For a moment, all of us joined them, our breathing matching theirs, a single organism gasping for faith. I felt the Hive breathing through me again, deeper than before, the pulse of its machinery in my bones. The scent of oil and rust filled my lungs until my head swam. Then came the collapse. A pressure valve ruptured above the central altar. A gout of black vapor erupted, swallowing the lumen light. The heat hit like a wall. I stumbled backward, coughing prayers. Han shouted orders that were lost in the roar. The servitors convulsed, chains rattling, their chests expanding beyond their frames. One by one, their restraints snapped. They fell like marionettes with their strings cut. I fled to the side console, slamming emergency seals. The machine spirit resisted, its icons flickering between compliance and denial. I begged it in the Emperor's name. It hissed static back at me. Somewhere through the smoke, I heard Han reciting, "Pressure rise, praise be rise, pressure fall, praise be fall," over and over, faster each time, until his voice became a blur. The air thickened to syrup. My lungs refused their duty. I tore off my rebreather and gasped, desperate. The taste was sweet again, too sweet, cloying, almost alive. Then, as suddenly as it began, the turbines stilled. Silence. The mist settled. The servitors lay motionless, mouths open in frozen prayer. The only sound was the faint drip of condensation from the ceiling, counting seconds into eternity. Han was kneeling before the altar. His mask hung loose around his neck. His lips were blue. He looked at me as if seeing something distant. "It listened," he whispered. "We sang, and it listened." Then he fell forward, face against the grating. I could not tell whether he prayed or died. I remained at my console for the rest of the cycle. There was no one left to give orders, but the work required doing. The gauges still flickered, and the readouts still demanded numbers. I cleaned my slate, wrote in careful script. System fluctuation severe. Overdrive achieved. Reclamation efficiency unknown. Function ongoing. The word comforted me. Function. Even now, with the hall, a tomb. It persisted. Before sealing the entry, I added, "Airflow sounds like chanting, possibly harmonic feedback." Then I sat back and listened. The whisper returned through the ducts, faint but steady. "Pressure rise, praise be rise." I mouthed the words until they became breath, until they became prayer. And when the vents exhaled, I exhaled with them. The first taste is ash, not memory. I breathe in the reclamation hall before dawn and feel a powder settle on the back of my tongue, fine as ground prayer char. It is not ash, the logs insist. It is particulate of unknown origin, negligible mass, safely within tolerance. The numbers say so. The numbers breathe for us when we cannot. I light the sensors anyway, though we are now forbidden to waste smoke except during sanctioned rites. The thin stream curls upward, bends toward the ductwork as if beckoned, and frays into the invisibility of motion. The hall's turbines loiter between beats, as though they mean to begin and then think better of it. Their pause births silence in the gaps, and in the silence, quiet as a thought I do not want, I hear the low burr of static. It is everywhere when I listen, and nowhere when I write it down. Adept Han does not come this cycle. He sent no directive. We found his mask beside the altar, gathered the remaining oil from its straps, and placed both in the reliquary for parts reclamation. There is no ceremony for the gradual absence of a superior. There is only the work, and the work requires breath. I take Han's place at the control dais, because someone must. I do not deserve the height of it, the view over the valley of machinery, yet the engines accept my shadow with mechanical indifference. The console's rune plate flickers toward green, falters into amber, and steadies at a shade I cannot name. My hand hesitates over the invocation stud. I have always pressed it as a matter of order. Now I press it as a matter of fear. The machine spirit sighs through the ducts, and the static rises with it like incense. I whisper to the panel, "Praise be your continuity." The words fog the glass and vanish. The static persists. The morning duty adepts thin themselves across the gantries. Their robes absorb the damp. Our footfalls ring down the weld ladders and into the throat of the hive, and for each echo there is an answering hiss, a breath that is not ours. I mark the first note of it at third hour. Acoustic grain present in airflow. Character, granular. Location, non-local. I add no speculation. The ledger takes truth better than imagining. At the 5th hour, the prefect's voice returns on the local vox. It comes in 3 parts. Machine hiss, human syllable. Machine hiss, as if our superior must climb out of static to address us. Praise be to function, he says. And the vox repeats half an echo in our ducts. Unction, unction, as though an old wound remembered its balm. Stability remains a prayer away. Increase tempo where you can. The Emperor's lungs do not tire. I do not answer aloud. I write, hear and obey. The rune plate stutters beneath my hand, and the light in the dais briefly patterns like teeth. I do not know why I think of teeth. I force myself to calculate intake variance by the liturgical method. 7 strokes of the stylus for each column. 9 to breathe. 2 to begin the next. Rhythm is mercy. Counting is prayer made small enough to carry. The static thickens by degrees, the way anxiety does, never all at once, never admitting it has increased. It ceases to sound like random snow and begins to resemble cloth scratched by a careful nail. When the turbines settle into a stable cadence, the static sits above them, persistent and uninvited harmony. I wonder if harmony can be heresy when the choir is steel. At mid-cycle, I am sent to the primary spine to inspect vent couplings on the eastern bank. The passage smells of warm copper and damp linen. Condensation beads the ribs and drips in a steady clock. My breath fogs in small hearts before my mouth. I pass the alcove where St. Arian used to hang and do not look long. The chain marks in the beam resemble fingerprints, and I am not ready to think of the saints as having been held by anything human. The vent couplings are sound. They glow with a soft life I can measure. Heat within tolerance, pressure within prayer. Yet even as the gauges nod along, the static winds itself tighter, threads of sound drawing together into something like shape. I kneel to write it, and for a foolish second, it seems to burn through the nib into the page. Rise, praise. The stylus stutters. I steady my hand. When I look back, the line has smoothed itself into obedient script. I leave the error as penance. On my return, I meet a junior adept named Trine from the census armature. I know him only by the neatness of his ledger columns, a tidy faith. Today his face looks rubbed thin. They sent me to count the unused breaths, he says. The words come out too quickly and then vanish behind a careful throat clearing. Forgive. I meant allocated flow to empty hab stacks. The upper manufactoria closed 3 more lines. We are to reassign their ration. Empty, I say. I have never liked that word. It suggests there is a shape where a thing should be. He nods once. The vents keep opening at their appointed hours. There is no one to breathe. Us. We walk together toward the east gantry. Trine achieves silence easily. I have to enter it 1 breath at a time. He stops beneath a lumen that flickers like a heartbeat with arrhythmia and takes out his slate. His stylus scratches softly, a tiny saw cutting through quiet. The static pricks the skin of my neck. Do you hear it? I ask before I think to bury the question. It sounds like superstition when I give it voice. The vox bleed? He says, keeping his eyes on his figures. Prefect says the insulation is old. He says we are to consider it a test of focus. If we cannot pray against distraction, perhaps we do not deserve to pray. It is not bleed, I say. The honesty startles me. It is forming. He lifts his head. His pupils are very wide. Forming what? I do not answer. The static makes a sound like the first letter of a word. By 7th hour, the machinery holds its breath. The tempo drops. The turbines hang in their turning the way a chest suspends itself before a sob. I find the emergency reliquary by touch and remove a coil of anointed twine. I wrap it around my wrist and tie it to the railing of the dais. It is a child's spell to keep from being lost in a crowd, a superstition against the hive stealing you into its throat. The administratum would frown. I tell myself it is for safety, and the word fits as comfort fits badly, but close enough to warm. Vox traffic multiplies. The channels swell with petition like the noise of a market. There are requests for ration increases, reports of sealing doors, of occupants found sleeping and not waking, of fire suppression blessed and failing. Over all of it, the static builds a roof, sure praise rise never quite committing to the full phrase. It is a refrain caught in the pipes of the cathedral, and it is waiting. When the request comes for a crawlspace inspection of the tertiary branch, I volunteer because I know the route, and because trine has already begun to tremble from the chest outward. I tap the sign of the cog against my sternum, accept a rebreather box more ceremonial than useful, and take a lumen with a dying cell because its light is the only kind that feels appropriate. Real brightness would be a lie. The crawl space opens from an access hatch behind the eastern bank. It is a throat within a throat, a narrow tube lined with throat hairs of cable, damp and warm as a creature's inside. I enter on hands and knees, the lumen a wobbling coin ahead of me. The smell is old linen and oil, the rest scent of the hive when no one is watching. Each meter forward finds another sigh. The static thickens until the lumen's filament grows a halo of grain. I breathe shallowly and count with my free hand. 5 ribs to a span, 5 spans to a coupling, 2 couplings to a turn. The first coupling holds. The second leaks in a way the gauge would not admit. A whisper of pressure so small it could be called dreaming. I press a palm against it and feel a trembling, as of a voice that has not yet found its lungs. I say, "Hush," because the gesture is older than me, older than the administratum, older than scripture. The trembling continues anyway. I write the coupling's number in my ledger and add a phrase I will later try to slash out. It hears. I turn once, twice. The lumen throws my shadow ahead as a hunched, obedient thing. Beneath the static, there is another sound now, like breath over the lip of a bottle. It is almost a syllable. I crawl faster, as if speed will outrun meaning. When the duct opens into a small sump, I lay on my side on the grating and let the lumen rest by my ear. The sump is a bowl, the color of old bone. Condensation beads and falls with such calm patience that I think if I had a decade and no other occupation, I could learn to count the seconds between drops and live inside their order forever. The static occupies the bowl, like dust motes in sunlight. I hold my breath and hear it more clearly. It does not suffer my control. It reduces every careful thing to sound again. Then the vents exhale, and the exhalation is not mechanical. It begins with the familiar scrap of numbers, the house script of my life. 32, 32, 2, 2. Then the numbers slow, and in their slowing I hear a human rhythm. The grain of the static roughens into throat. Something, the duct, the sump, the hive itself tries out a syllable the way a child mouths the shape of a forbidden word. Bree. The lumen fails. The dark is sudden, a velvet collapse. I do not shake the torch. I do not dare move as if motion would startle whatever has found its breath. I hold my breath and feel my heart attempt the old escape through the old ribs. The syllable does not repeat. The static retreats a handspan. When I click the lumen back into a half-light, the sump shows only itself. A bowl, a grate, a slow drop. The duct resumes its whisper of wind. The rational part of me climbs into my mouth and suggests a harmonic, a freak resonance in the vent membranes, a pattern sort and downed because you were warned by your own listening. The rational part of me tastes of copper and ash. The part that serves goes on serving. On my way out, I pass a hatch. I do not remember ever opening. J73 divided by 5B. Stamped with an old seal, no one has re-inked in years. The wheel turns under my hand with a softness that suggests it has been turned recently, often, by hands that meant to be quiet. The passage beyond is not on the map in my head. It slopes downward at a meek angle, apologetic for its existence. I stand in the threshold and let the static wash my face. It gathers like breath before speech. Later, I tell it, though I have never spoken to a passage, and the habit of answering is a dangerous one. Back in the hall, Trine watches me return with the expression of a man who expects to be alone and is not sure whether to be grateful. "Anything?" he says. "Only air," I answer. It is not a lie if I use the largest possible truth. We work the rest of the cycle as if the hall were a church we carry upon our backs. Each rite takes longer because the pauses between words carry weight. Each hand sign feels heavier because the air has learned to notice it. The vox scribbles itself across the ceiling, and the ducts answer in kind, and through it all the turbines earn their keep with stubborn, weary turning. At the day's end, there is no ending. The lights do not change. The hive's chronometers have begun to miscount. We dismiss ourselves by the old measure. When the hand shakes and the eye snags on shadow and the spine surrenders its straightness, I return to my cell by a route that gives the appearance of choice. At each junction, a small wind pushes the smoke of my sensor toward a side corridor I have never used. I take my usual turn as if the choice were mine. The smoke curls away, disappointed. In my quarters, the vent wheezes as an old man telling a familiar story. The lumen refuses to decide between life and failure and settles on a fever sheen. I sit, I open the ledger, I write. Couplings inspected, pressures annotated, vox anomaly noted. I hesitate over the blank that waits for faith and fill it with function instead. We continue. The words steady my hand. Then I lower my head to the wall. The pipe behind it is warm. The sound inside it is larger than my ear. Bree. It tries again. The syllable catches like cloth on a nail. The rest of the word refuses to be born. Breathe, I say, into the metal before I can stop myself. I am listening. Silence. Then an intake. Then another attempt. Bre. The sound breaks into grain, rises as if disappointed, settles like ash. I lay my palm flat and feel a shiver pass through the wall in answer, not like a machine's thrum, but like a creature restraining its next word. I cannot give you the rest, I whisper, and the confession shocks me with its shape. We were never taught to finish a word the hive began. I close the ledger. I seal it with oil. The drop spreads and becomes the shape of a mouth without language. The smell burrows into my skull and settles there, as if it too intends to learn to speak. Before I allow whatever sleep remains to take me, I untie the anointed twine from my wrist and loop it around the vent's grate. The knot is simple, a child's safeguard, an admission of fear. The vent exhales, and the knot quivers. The static attends me like a priest. It is not prayer yet. It is not voice. It is the sound beneath prayer, the breath a word makes when it has yet to be accepted by the mouth. It is the hive becoming an organ that has learned its first vowel. I put my ear to the grate, and the grate to my ear. The cycle ends. The sound does not. I sleep in the afterword of it, and in my sleep I do not dream. There is only the first half of a word beating against the dark like a caged bird. When I wake, the ash taste remains. I do not know whether I am swallowing it or it is swallowing me. In the morning, I will go to hatch J73 divided by 5B and see whether the rest of the word waits there like a locked breath. I will write down what I hear and call it error so that I may keep my faith tidy. I will be as exact as a prayer can be when it has to pass through a mouth made of doubt. For now, in the small silence I am permitted, I speak the only thing I can offer to a machine learning to pray. I hear you, I say. The grate grows warm beneath my hand. The static trembles once, as a pupil does when it first finds the light. And from somewhere below, the hive answers me with the oldest sound it has, a breath. It is almost enough to be a word. The air tastes of paper. Every breath feels as though it has passed through 1,000 documents before reaching my lungs dry, brittle, exhausted. The administratum calls it recirculated blessing. I call it dust made holy. 3 days since the engines slowed. 2 since the prefect's final broadcast. No new decree has replaced it. The city runs on repetition. Vox loops echo the same phrase every hour. Maintain composure. Maintain praise. Maintain function. The words arrive, filtered through static. A lullaby for the suffocating. I have been reassigned from reclamation to census clarification subsection tertius, a division created overnight to count air-related casualties without using the word death. We are told the emperor does not die. Therefore his people do not die, they merely return their measure. The logic is flawless. The smell is not. Our office occupies a former devotional archive. The walls still bear the ghost shapes of removed reliquaries. Pale rectangles amid soot. 40 desks stand in perfect rows. Only 8 of them are manned. The rest remain clean, untouched, awaiting adepts who will never report for duty, but whose names still appear on the rota because deletion requires authorization. And no one is brave enough to ask for it. Each of us wears a rebreather. The filters are meant for counting, not surviving. When they clog, we recite the litany of continuity and keep writing. The sound of styluses scratching parchment is soft, reverent. The rhythm of people pretending the act itself creates air. Outside the archive, the hive wheezes. At 4th hour, a clerk from Vox Relay brings us the day's transmissions. She sets the stack of wax cylinders on my desk, each one stamped with a different stratum code. Her fingers leave clean streaks in the dust. Upper manufactoria sealed themselves. She says through her mask, Governor's Quarter 2, orders to conserve supply. And the lower stacks? I ask. She hesitates. They conserve nothing. I take the cylinders to the player and slot the first. The voice that emerges is formal, faintly slurred by lack of breath. Casualty report follows. Designation, workforce, 1,427B. Number returned, 600. Number remaining, unconfirmed. Airflow insufficient. Workers collapsed mid-hymn. Request additional blessing. The next cylinder carries a different sound entirely, no report, only noise. Hundreds of voices chanting fragments of the pressure prayer, out of sync, rising into coughs. The cylinder ends in a hollow pop as if the air itself ruptured. I mark it non-compliant recording and file it under to be reviewed. By 7th hour, the lights flicker from bone white to amber. That is the new dusk. The chronometers are weeks behind. Adepts whisper that the Emperor has turned his face away. But officially, we attribute the change to luminal fatigue. When I leave the archive for meal ration, I pass a squad of enforcers marching toward the lower lifts. Their visors are fogged. Each carries a portable lumen and a canister marked atmospheric suppression. Behind them trail a pair of priests with sensor tubes releasing thick incense. The smoke clings low, turning the corridor into a corridor of ghosts. One of the enforcers pauses beside me. His Vox speaker crackles. You from the census arm? Yes, adept. Keep the ledgers ready. The lower levels are losing compliance. Losing compliance. He says the word compliance, the way one might say heartbeat. Then he moves on. I wait until they vanish before continuing. The smell of their incense lingers sweet, nauseating, almost floral. Beneath it, I can still taste the city's dust. The refectory is nearly empty. Food paste arrives in tubes now. Utensils are considered unnecessary luxuries. Across the table sits Trine, the junior adept from reclamation. He looks smaller inside his robe, as if air loss has shrunk the man but not the cloth. They found Han, he says quietly. I stop mid-swallow. Found? Ak. Down vent. Not far from the saints. He'd written the same phrase 100 times before the ink dried. Trine leans closer. It listened. The words hang between us like a fault. We eat in silence. The vents above the refectory cough dust every few minutes, and each cough feels like punctuation. Back at the archive, the prefect's seal appears on the central Vox pillar. His face is a shimmer of interference, voice metallic and slow. Citizens of Karthane, you are the lungs of the Emperor. Breathe with discipline. Breathe with gratitude. Breathe as one. The broadcast loops twice, then cuts off mid-sentence. No one comments. We keep writing. The cylinders multiply. Each report contradicts the last. One claims atmospheric stability. The next insists total collapse. I record both with equal precision. The truth, I have learned, is a number that refuses to stay still. By the 15th hour, the first riot reaches our stratum. We hear it through the ducts before we feel it low thuds like malfunctioning pumps. Then the Vox relays flash emergency glyphs. Trine stands by the window slit, peering into the haze. They're burning incense drums, he says. Hundreds of them, trying to sweeten the air. I join him. The corridor beyond is a grey river of movement citizens wrapped in cloth, carrying icons of the Emperor, chanting as they walk. The chant is wrong, drawn out, desperate. The breath is the Emperor. The Emperor is the breath. Every few lines, the chorus breaks into coughing. Enforcers advance through them with gas projectors that spew blue mist. The crowd staggers but does not flee. Their prayers turn to screams, then dissolve into more coughing. The Vox feed stutters, losing words, until all that remains is a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, collapse. Trine lowers his gaze. Should we record this? Everything must be recorded, I say, because I can think of no safer answer. We catalogue the event as Public Air Adjustment Incident 73B. Estimated casualties. Pending confirmation. Near shift's end, an order arrives through pneumatic tube. The capsule clatters against my desk like a bone. Inside, the parchment bears a single line. Seal census doors. Continue litanies until further notice. No signature. No seal. Only dust. I lock the archive as instructed. From outside come the muffled sounds of struggle boots, metal, breathless voices reciting half-remembered hymns. The sound reminds me of turbines misaligned, each part still turning, unable to find the old harmony. Trine sits 2 desks away, muttering numbers under his breath. His mask hisses with every intake. They said the air would last another week, he says. Didn't they? They said many things. He nods as if agreement were salvation. At the far end of the hall, one of the lumen strips bursts with a pop. Dust drifts down like ash, glittering in the faint light. I raise my hand and watch the particles settle on my glove. They sparkle briefly, then vanish into the fabric, as if absorbed. The hive is learning to breathe us. Night comes as a texture, not a time. The archive's lumen strips dim to a fever color and hum like tired bees, and in that poor glow the dust makes weather of the room. It drifts in small eddies from the vents and gathers in the corners as if corners were lungs, where the room itself stores breath it cannot afford. We work by decree, seal doors, maintain litanies, record all returns of measure. The doors seal with a sound like a sigh that has given up being a word. Beyond the steel, the hive murmurs through its ducts, a dull crowd noise interrupted by shouting and the stretch of sirens that cannot quite find their notes. The Vox pillar spits out intermittent bulletins in the prefect's flattened voice, old orders repeating with new timestamps, yesterday speaking with today's date. I thread fresh parchment into the ledger clamp. My hands leave clean streaks where they pass. The habit of precision survives any environment. It is the last liturgy to die. I copy 3 casualty lists and a ration reallocation decree. The numbers resist. They shift within the ink, as if the act of writing them down asks them to hold their breath, and they refuse. Trine breaks the silence. "Do you remember the test?" he asks, eyes fixed on his page. "The one in training. The parable of the drowning grain silo." I nod. We all learn the same cautions. When the silo floods, the clerk must count the sacks, not the water. He exhales a laugh that isn't one. I think I am counting the water. A thud touches the door. Not hard enough to be a battering, not soft enough to be mistake. A palm, perhaps, or a head bowing. The steel transmits the sound like a bone. We stare at it as if staring were a right of defense. Maintain function, I say, because saying it out loud gives it shape. Maintain praise. Maintain. The door shakes again, 3 taps in quick succession, like a code the city forgot. Then a voice, thin through the seam. Census. Please. We must register. We have 3. A cough interrupts the last word. 3 who have returned. We must ensure their measure is tallied. It is almost comforting, that plea for paperwork. I rise before Trine can. The decree forbids unsealing. The decree also instructs us to catalog returns without delay. Both are true. Only one can be obedient. I press my ear to the crack and let the hive's breath wash it. Name and stratum, I say, keeping my voice in the register of forms. Vashti Keln. Warren's 8. We carried them up. The lifts don't answer. We walked. It took a long inhale, a longer hold. We must register them before we cannot. Trine looks at me over his mask. The question in his eyes is older than regulation. I withdraw my ear, dip my stylus, and speak through steel. We acknowledge your measure. Slide the tokens. A silence. Then the soft rasp of metal against metal as something thin is pushed beneath the gap. 3 identity slivers, stamped with names and lifetimes, the hive did not have time to pronounce aloud. I bind them with string and seal them to a page, a paper burial. When I finish the notation, the corridor beyond is quiet. Either they left, or the air did. We resume the litanies because the feeling of work is as close to breathing as anything now. The room seems to shrink every hour, not in size, but in air. The symbols on the ledgers shine with a damp that is not moisture. I pull off my mask for a moment to wipe the inside. The air that touches my teeth is heavy and faintly sweet, as if the city is molasses and we are spoons. The vox cracks open with new sound. At first it is only a roar, but within the roar a cadence forms. In out, then words clot into the spaces. By decree of the prefect. Sanctioned moderation of unrest. Preserve breathable order. A shout in the background. The channel shifts. Another voice intrudes. Higher, frightened. They've sealed the hab bridges. No, not us. The air won't cross. The transmission smears into static and leaves us with our own breathing. Trine gathers his papers into neat stacks, aligning corners, a gesture more prayer than habit. How many is this cycle? He asks. I consult the tally, though I already know the shape of the number. 17,000 recorded, which is to say, some. He nods, as if the answer were merciful. He writes the number, and the number makes a sound inside me that is not grief and not relief. Only the dull acceptance that a figure can be both smaller and larger than the truth. The archive shakes once, gently. Dust upends itself from the rafters and descends in a slow veil. Within it, my lumen's light turns into a column of gold brown. The particles rise and fall as though trying to agree on a direction. For a breathless moment, I imagine the dust itself is practicing how to breathe. The pneumatic tube rattles. A fresh capsule leaps into the tray. I crack the wax and unfurl the parchment. It is short. Reassignment. 2 adepts to accompany enforcer squads as compliance witnesses. Document all interactions. Attest to proportionality of atmospheric correction. A stamped signature bleeds at the bottom like a wound. Prefect Manus. Which 2? Trine says. I look at the roster. 8 names. 6 scratched through with thin lines that pretend not to be absences. 2 remain. I do not make Trine ask again. We are assigned, I say. He closes his ledger carefully, as one might close the eyes of a friend, and gathers his filters. We break the seal and let the corridor in. Its breath meets ours like strangers in a narrow stare. The enforcers wait beneath a coughing lumen. Their visors are mirrored now, reflecting our shrunken shapes back at us. A priest accompanies them with a censer the size of a child. His smoke crawls along the floor, sweet and false. The perfume of a garden described by a book. Witnesses, the sergeant says through a voice box that turns words into coins. We'll keep it brisk. Stratum 6-9. Public air adjustment in progress. We move. The lift declines to open. The sergeant swears in a register that belongs to industry, not devotion, and orders the stairs. We descend into deeper warmth. The air thickens until my lungs feel like cloth hung in rain. On stratum 6-9, the doors have been welded back, and the corridor beyond yawns like a throat. People cluster in the widening. Not a mob, no energy for that, only a congregation without a plan. Mothers hold cloths to children's mouths. Old men grip icons until their fingers go white. A novice priest stands on a crate repeating, "The Emperor breathes through you," until the phrase is only rhythm. When the enforcers appear, the crowd does not surge. It sways. "Maintain spacing," the sergeant declares. "Designated incense only. Unauthorized burners will be neutralized." I smell no incense. Someone croaks, and in the pause that follows, I taste the truth. The city no longer allows sweeteners that it cannot claim. The enforcers deploy their canisters. Blue vapor spills outward like bruised light. The crowd coughs. Some kneel. Some lower their heads to the level of the smoke as if kissing a relic. The priest with us raises his censer in response. White incense pours out and curls along the floor. For a second, the two smokes meet and weave like opposing choirs attempting the same hymn. "Record," the sergeant says without turning. I raise my slate. Trine raises his. We list phrases. Adjustment initiated. Crowd compliance. Partial. Dispersal. Proceeding. Between the lines, I hear a sound that makes me pause. A collective exhale perfectly timed, as if the hive itself conducted it. The crowd breathes out together, not because it chooses to, but because the air leaves all at once. Something in the duct above us answers. A low, almost pleased hum. A woman stumbles past me, clutching a paper icon. "We're doing it wrong," she whispers. Not to me. "We're breathing wrong." I want to tell her there is no wrong, only measure. I want to tell her that if she breathes precisely, the numbers will come to her aid. But the ducts above us shiver, and a hush takes the corridor, and in the hush I hear a syllable I know too well. "Bree." Like a ghost, the half-word touches our faces. The crowd flinches as one organism. The enforcers do not react. Either their visors insulate them, or their training forbids them to hear. Trine's eyes find mine over his mask. He nods once. The gesture is small and means, "I heard it too." The enforcers advance. The crowd steps back, then forward, then back again. A tide too tired to choose a shore. Someone runs. Someone falls. The priest beside us raises his voice and loses it to a cough. I write compliance unsteady and hate the line for how clean it looks. A flare pops at the far end of the corridor, orange, sharp. It throws everyone into new shapes. In its light, the dust becomes flakes. The flakes become snow. The snow becomes a hatching of blades in air. The enforcer's blue vapor eats the orange and turns green. People gasp and find no purchase in the breath. The hive exhales to fill the space, the gasp leaves, and for a heartbeat, we are all synchronized. Enforcer, adept, child, priest. It feels like peace. It is only the mercy of a system learning to time us. "Enough," the sergeant says to no one, and the canisters wheeze dry. After, there is the rearrangement. Not cleanup, there is nothing left to clean, only to move from one column to another. Trine and I confirm names when we can. When we cannot, the enforcers mark a hash and move on. The priest has run out of incense. He swings his empty censer anyway, and the hollow chime of its chain sounds like a throat clearing and finding no word. We return to the archive with our ledgers warm from our hands. The doors seal because they were told once and have not been told otherwise. Inside, the air seems thinner than before, not by measure, but by intention. I slide the new figures into the book and feel the weight shift. I could calculate how many people the Hive learned today, and I know better. Trine sits. He takes off his mask. His mouth is the color of old paper. They said, "The Emperor listens," he says. Do you think he does? I look at the ledger. Oil glistens in its seam like a dark river. The dust lifts in a small wind from the vent and settles on the ink until the letters look furred. I think of the half-word, of hatch J 73, divided by 5B, waiting with its slope toward unspoken places, of the way the ducts are teaching themselves to say what we have always said for them. He listens, I say at last. I think he only listens. Trine accepts this as if it were a kindness. He closes his eyes, opens them, writes a line that is dutiful and wrong because all lines are now. The Vox pillar coughs and plays back our prefect's oldest broadcast. The static flattens his syllables. For a moment, the machine and the man are indistinguishable. We finish as we began. We write. We seal. We breathe the paper breathes us. When I leave for my cell, the corridor smells of spent incense and hot metal. Far below, somewhere the color of bone, the Hive takes another breath that the city cannot spare and holds it like a secret. I pass the stairwell that leads toward J73 divided by 5B and look down into its unhelpful darkness. The static gathers at its mouth like fog. It seems to wait for me to be a different man. Later, I tell it again, and this time the word returns to me from the ductwork, bent by distance into something like a scent. Back in my quarters, I undo the knot of the twine from my vent and retie it tighter. I put my ear to the grate. The city speaks only in dust tonight. The half-word does not come. I breathe and count. I count and call it prayer. The ledger on my desk glows faintly in the lumen's poor light, and for the first time since I learned the rites, I consider that perhaps a book can drown. I sleep between breaths, a shallow sliver of unconsciousness. When I wake, my mouth tastes of paper, and the first breath hurts enough to feel like devotion. Outside the door, the Hive rehearses the next word. They send me down with a pen. Not a weapon, not a rope. A pen with a fresh nib and a bottle of oil to seal the pages against damp, and a ledger stamped with the prefect's thin-faced seal. Audit of collapsed strata, it says in a hand that has never touched condensation. Assessment of atmospheric deviations. Verification of population returns. The letters look confident enough to breathe without me. Trine is assigned as my second. His mask fogs at the edges when he reads the orders. We go by the old service stair, he says. Lifts won't answer below 75. An enforcer sergeant meets us at the stairhead with 3 visored figures and a priest too young for the weight of his censer. The priest's incense pools around our boots. The enforcer's canisters carry the blue sigil of atmospheric suppression, a correction more ritual than mercy. The sergeant scans our orders and nods once. Your witnesses, he says. You watch what the Hive does and write. You do not tell it to stop. I would not presume, I answer, and it is not irony. Presumption and air are equally scarce. The stairwell opens like a wound, damp, grooved, descending in spirals lit by emergency beacons that pulse at a slow, patient rhythm. Their light is not light. It is the memory of light, orange and low and tired. Every pulse makes the dust blink. We step into the heat and begin to move downward. The smell changes first. On stratum 76, the air tastes like old paper and oil. By 78, there is a sweetness beneath the rust, a syrup that coats the tongue and makes the next breath a labor. At 81, water has found the seams. The steps bead with condensation, and every shoe print becomes a reliquary for ankles, printed in thin mud. We pass signs I do not remember learning but know by shape. Hazard glyphs paled by damp. arrows pointing to vents that no longer hum, painted icons of saints whose faces are transformed by mildew into the faces of the drowned. On the fourth landing, a devotional plaque has peeled from the wall. I lift it carefully. The text is a fragment of the Litany of Continuity. The final line reads, "There is no down where the Emperor is." I do not read it aloud. I hand it to the priest. He accepts it with both hands and does not speak either. We reach 79 and pause at an access grill to take lungs in order. The sergeant leans near the mesh and listens. Distantly, the ducts exhale in a rhythm that feels too even to be accident. The priest glances up as if the ceiling might answer his eyes. The enforcers check their canisters, which are full. Trine checks his slate, which is clean. I check my pen, which is faithful. At 84, we find the first door that will not open because it has decided not to. The sergeant signals his men. They pry. Metal yields like old bone. The gap discharges heat and a smell like cooling blood. Inside is a corridor as long as a prayer said without belief. It slopes downward not by design, but by decision made elsewhere. The floor has shifted toward the right, a small tilt that makes the body correct itself without thought. A constant bow. Note the incline. Trine whispers, as if the floor has ears. His stylus trembles just once and then steadies. He writes, "Floor trend, 2.5 degrees southeast." I add beneath it, "Sound of strain within the walls. Machine bones complain." I do not know why I use the word bones until I hear the steel answer with a small, embarrassed groan. We move. The world below is not ruin in the way of stories. There are no spectacular breaches, no grand heroic collapses. There is surrender floor by floor, corridor by corridor. Bulkheads lean, pipes sag like old veins. Doors have grown tired of the shapes they were cut to fit. The city has begun to settle, the way a body does into a final bed. We cross a hab bridge where the railings weep brown water, the far end has sunk, and the bridge is a shallow, shining slope. People once waited here. The benches remember their weight and keep the hollows. Posters with ration schedules have let go of the walls and lie face down on the floor, soft with damp. The priest murmurs a blessing. One enforcer whispers something that might be a prayer if he believed in more than orders. The emergency beacons throb. At 87, we meet the sky. It opens where a manufactorum once rose, a hall of pillars and belts and singing chain. The roof has gone, not collapsed but absented, as if the hive decided it no longer wanted a top in this place. We stand at the threshold of a great void. Far above? No. Far below. What should be the lower stacks glitter like constellations in a night turned upside down. A dust of lumen scraps, orange and red, scattered across darkness, as if someone spilled a sky and forgot to sweep. The sergeant steps forward and aims his lumen into the deep. The beam pours downward and never reaches the far side. In the light, particles rise, hang, and drift, not dust only, but threads of metal shaving and shedding, moisture caught mid-fall, flecks of insulation, a slow blizzard of hive skin. The air moves across the mouth of the void in soft strokes that my own lungs answer despite themselves. I realize my breathing has been entrained by a space. "Right," the sergeant says, and he says it carefully, as if his words might fall too. Trine writes, "Structural void." I write, "The sky is below us. The city has learned a new direction." My nib scratches like a small honesty in a place made of large lies. The priest makes the sign of the Aquila toward the abyss and then lowers his hands because even that seems like weight the void will ask him to pay for. We wait for a sound that never comes, and in its place we hear all the other sounds we brought with us, our machines, our gear, the slight complaint of steel remembering the position it once held. We skirt the edge. The enforcers keep us inside their triangle the way shepherds keep lambs from cliff faces. The triangle shrinks and expands with the shape of the corridors. We pass rooms where the furniture has crept outward toward the slope, where curtains have learned to hang at a bias, where a child's drawing of a star has slid down a wall and left a comet tail of blue wax behind it. We pass an infirmary where oxygen masks hang from hooks like molted skins. The tags attached to them flutter in a wind that does not choose a direction. At 91, we hear a sound that is close to a word. It is not the half-syllable from the ducts, not the bray caught like cloth on a nail. It is longer, lower, a vowel that forgets itself at the end. It comes up the stairwell like a tide and presses the masks against our faces. The priest challenges the air as if it were a congregation. "Breathe with discipline," he says carefully, and his voice slurs at the edges, and for a moment I hear Prefect Manus's flattening vox speak through the young man's throat. I know without telling that we are approaching hatch J73 divided by 5B. It belongs to me in the way a trespass does to the trespasser. The enforcers do not know it until we stand before it, and it knows us by the warmth of the hand I put upon its wheel in an earlier chapter of my life. "Mapped?" the sergeant asks. "No," I say. He weighs this. Then, we do not open. Weigh. Orders say audit. Trine murmurs, not to contradict, merely to announce the line that will become the line we cross. The sergeant considers the hatch as if it were a person with whom he might negotiate. The emergency beacons strobe orange across his visor. The incense gathers at our feet like weather that forgot how to rise. In the sidelong light, the wheel on the hatch gleams where hands have polished it with fear. He nods once. "Open. Note that I told you not to." We all agree to the fiction that he is overruled. The wheel is soft under my gloved palm. It turns easily, as if someone has done the hard work for me many times. The smell that sighs from within is old linen and warm copper. The corridor slopes down in apology. The walls sweat. The dust in the beam becomes a constellation again. We enter the triangle of enforcers reshaping to hold us in. The geometry here is wrong in a quiet way. Corners lean. The floor bows in the middle like a man under a weight he would not name. The beacons pulse slower. The walls have condensation patterns that look like script only when I refuse to blink. At the first bend, the static begins. It does not come from a speaker. It does not come from a machine. It occupies the air like humidity does. It clings to the soft inside of the mask. It makes the rebreathers filter a mouthful of bees. The sergeant lifts a hand, and we freeze as one organism. The static changes key. A phrase appears inside it. Not words, yet word-shaped. This is new. Until now, the half-syllable has lived in pipes, in vents, in metal throat. Now the air itself learns it. Breathing. Not ours. Not one body. Many, but not a crowd either. A system. A building practicing. The sound draws our lungs after it, as a choirmaster draws song from throats by gesture alone. The young priest whispers a correction litany, but the rhythm of his syllables falls naturally into the cadence, and the litany becomes accompaniment, and he does not notice because it feels like obedience. Trine's hand finds my sleeve, a child seeking in the dark. He does not pull. He holds so as not to fall through an idea. We move forward like supplicants through a procession. The corridor opens into a small chamber ringed with intake grills. The grills are silent. The breathing is not. In the center of the floor sits a console of old make, the kind that eats paper and gives out ribbon. It is alive, because its rune shows a faint eye open, not awake, alert, not interested. On the panel, someone has written a phrase 100 times in 100 inks until the layer of words has become a kind of varnish. It listened. The sergeant sets a hand on my shoulder and nods to the console. "Do your work." I lay the ledger on the metal. The page gleams where the oil from ceiling has made a river between the lines. I write. The air is speaking without conduit. The architecture has bowed toward it. There is a new sky below us, and it breathes. The console hums. The paper tray rattles. A ribbon of typing whispers out, letter by letter, each character a small breath. The message is not ours. It is not in the administratum's formal hand. It is also not illiterate. It is something that learned from us by watching how we moved ink. Breath equals function. Function equals faith. Faith equals return. The words are terrible because they make sense. The priest goes pale. Blasphemy. He breathes. And in his mouth the word sounds like awe. Behind us, the stairwell gives a soft, sorrowing groan. The incline sharpens by a hair. I feel the change in my ankles. The sergeant looks toward the hatch as if he can see the whole hive leaning through the walls. "Note it," he says. Trine writes angle shift. Memory of weight increased. His handwriting is a surprising kindness in a place so tired. I add, down is no longer a direction. It is a hunger. The grills around the room sigh. They do not turn on. They try the idea of turning on, and decide, for now, not to. The console types another strip, slower, as if each letter costs an effort measured in oxygen. We hear. We learn. We return. "That's enough," the sergeant says softly, like a man leaving a chapel. Back to the stair. The hive does not need us to teach it any more prayers today. We withdraw. The hatch accepts the wheel and closes with manners. On the landing, the temperature has risen by a degree. The emergency beacons pulse faster, or I am the one who does. We continue the audit down the next flights because our orders were to observe, because our faith is to obey. Because even gravity is a law that likes to be seconded by a clerk's hand. At 95, a corridor has sagged so low that the ceiling licks the crown of the sergeant's visor. At 97, we find a hab where chairs have gathered at the downhill end like livestock in a storm. At 98, the stair turns into a ramp, and a ramp into a slope, and the slope into something like a stream bed where metal has remembered being ore. We do not reach 100. The stair ends in air. We stand at the edge of a great cut. The city has slid here, body inside body, strata into strata, a folding that makes new walls where old floors were. There is a curving, a gentle patient bend, and I think of a spine. Far below, lights glow like embers on a fallen altar. Between us and them hangs a slow dust that moves in a tide none of us created. The air presses our chests with that invisible hand that asks, "Is it worth it?" We answer by breathing again. "Enough," the sergeant repeats. We go back. Witness made. I turn once to look toward the hatch that I cannot see from here, and I realize the direction I face does not matter. My body insists on an up that the hive no longer honors. The emergency beacons pulse like sunrise in a place that has found a new horizon within itself. On the way up, the stair complains in small, polite noises. Our legs find their old obedience. The enforcers are quiet, which is the same as praying. The young priest clutches the plaque from the wall to his chest like a shield with words on it. At the 79th landing, Trine stops. "Listen," he says. I do. The half-syllable has grown its second half. It lives in the walls like a heart behind ribs. "Breathe," the hive says in a voice paved with static and heat and dust and old paper. And for a moment, I think I hear my name in it, because a city learns its people by counting them. And counting is only another way of remembering. We return to the stairhead with pages weighted by oil and handwriting. The sergeant signs our ledger with a line that has a tremor. The priest replaces the plaque where it was and leaves a thumbprint in the damp. The incense ends itself on the last step. The door closes to keep the upward air from falling. In the archive, the prefect's newest decree waits ink still wet. Seal barely set. Do not descend without sanction. The hive remains stable by fiat. Reassign breath to the faithful. Audit returns by proxy. The words have the clean smell of lies that have not yet learned to rot. Trine and I sit. We lay the ledger open between us and watch the oil glisten in the crease like a thin river. I write the summary line because that is my duty. The city is settling toward itself. Architecture bends to breath. Below us is a sky with lungs. I dot the final mark with oil. a small, dark planet complete unto itself. When I lift my head, the vent above the ledger exhales across the page, and the letters quiver. It is almost a caress, almost an approval, almost a claim. I seal the entry. The drop spreads. It looks like an eye closing. I am not permitted to decide what the hive is learning. I am only permitted to count the signs of its education. But in the deepest, quietest part of me, the part that writes where no one else can see, I confess, we did not descend. We fell politely. And we have not reached the bottom yet. The first voice arrives as a form, not a whisper, not a moan, not the private syllables of grief, but a string of docket numbers recited in a tone I know from 1,000 mornings at a desk. Hive Karthane, subsection Tertius. Roll call for returns 774 Theta, Annexure 12. Attesting witnesses none. Signature deferred, awaiting seal. The Vox pillar speaks it at 4th hour, while the archive doors are still sealed and the air moves only because the room remembers how to gesture. Trine freezes with his stylus above a blank column, the tilt of his wrist fixed in devotion and alarm. Repeat, I say, because that is what procedure dictates when a transmission exceeds expectation. The pillar obeys. The words are identical down to the hesitation before annexure, the cough that is not a cough between witnesses and none. In the pause after awaiting seal, I hear static organize itself like breath around a prayer. Trine looks to me for the right that will explain this. There is none. We do the one thing our order knows how to do, regardless of content. We write. Hive Karthane, subsection Tertius. I copy it as it comes, the syllables smoothing into lines, the lines into columns, the columns into a ledger that already knows the shape of this entry. When I reach the end, I add a witness mark because the voice asked for one. My hand shakes once, and the oil seal blooms like a bruise where it falls. It sounded like Trine begins and then decides against choosing the noun. Like an adept, like a clerk, like us, we listen. The pillar waits. Dust sneezes out of the vent as if the room itself wanted to clear its throat. Then the same voice returns, farther away now, echoed as if speaking from a corridor of filing cabinets. Requesting allocation of breath for form completion. Requesting, the word snags in static, resume smaller. Requesting stylus. We do not give it one. We copy the request into the margins and proceed to the next report because the tube coughs a new capsule into the tray and the city outpaces even death with its paperwork. It is not the last of them. By 7th hour, the pillar carries two kinds of broadcasts. The first is familiar. Prefect Marnus's decrees, replayed with new timestamps and a narrowing of tone, as though the machine that plays him has learned which syllables matter and has dismissed the rest. Breathe with discipline, rejoice in scarcity, the hive remains stable by fiat. The second sound is new and many-throated. Not moans, not names. Forms. Enclosure for returns, schedule gamma. Attrition attested, seal pending. Casualty addendum 9. Please acknowledge receipt. Please acknowledge. Vox docket spin, channel 3 to 9. Am I heard? Is this the right column? The voices never ask for mercy. They ask for the proper place. They want their figures to live in the right cells, their seals to be set, their measurements to be acknowledged. This should comfort me. It does, in the way that a familiar hymn comforts even when sung at a graveside. We catalog them all. The ledgers swell with neat despair. The ink shines where the oil meets it. I invent a rubric because there is no rubric for this. Posthumous administrative traffic. I give it a code and a color strip. Trine accepts the innovation without comment because he has learned that institutional heresy, when committed by ledgers, is called procedure. At 9th hour, a voice speaks my division's litany back to me. Blessed be the air that moves through man, it says, and the emperor who breathes through all things. Intake pressure, normalization, deferred. Flow variance, circled. Witness signature, Absent. Present yourselves. The last two words are not in the prayer. They sound like an old door opening. Source? Trine asks the pillar, as if the bone of a machine will answer. The rune panel offers a string of figures that make no sense, coordinates within the hive that resolve to a junction with no room attached. I copy them anyway. Then I write. Voices employ our litanies in ledger form. Require acknowledgement. Should we respond? Trine whispers. We are responding, I say, and show him the page. He nods, relieved and fearful to see that duty and answer can be the same line. The enforcers bring us outside again at 11th hour, per the prefect's demand that witnesses attest to proportionality of atmospheric correction. The phrase tastes of iron on the tongue. The sergeant's visored face reflects the corridor light in long sickle shapes. The priest with him has lost his voice to a cough and swings his censer silently, tipping wax, smoke rising like the past softened and perfumed. Stratum 7-3 receives us with a sound like a throat swallowing wrong. The crowd is smaller today. Fewer bodies, more space. The air not thin, exactly selective. Blue vapor drifts low. The ducts above us hum a soft encouragement. I brace without thinking and find my ribs keeping time with the hum, as if the hive has reached inside and wound a small key behind the breastbone. A voice from the vox pillar at the corner speaker breaks across the enforcer's channel with the calm of a clerk who expects to be obeyed. Compliance roll. Section 18. Names as follows. It is a reading of the dead and not of the dead. Names spoken as if called for appointment. People in the corridor stop and listen as if late for a meeting. A woman near me lifts her chin and answers when she hears her own. Her voice is steady. Present, she says, and coughs into the word, and the voice from the speaker marks present with a sound like a pen against wood. Record. The sergeant orders without looking at us. We do. The list continues. Some names answer, some do not. Each answer sounds like someone putting their hand on a door handle in a dark hall. When the list ends, the speaker adds, intake completed, exhalation pending. The phrase makes the crowd sway. The ducts exhale on cue. The people breathe out together as if taking orders from the air. Proportional, the sergeant says into his collar, and elsewhere in the hive a ledger agrees. I write. The city manages its own attendance. The air calls roll, the lungs obey. The sentence shames and steadies me in equal portions. We return to the archive with our seals warm from our hands. The pillar waits. It churs, once like a bird that learned the sound from a recording. Then a new voice arrives, one I have never heard and yet hear daily. The cadence of training catechism. Recite, it instructs. Answer in form. Trine fumbles with his mask straps, as if the words themselves had found fingers to touch his face. Do you hear it? He says. And the question is ridiculous, only if we pretend not to be ourselves. I hear it. I answer. Recite, the pillar repeats, and this time the cadence adds a kindness, the way a teacher speaks to a child who is not at fault for being slow. Begin with statement of function. We do not answer. We are not specimens. We are clerks. We are not trained for dialogue with walls. Begin with statement of function. The voice says a third time, and the air presses my chest until the breath that leaves my body becomes the first word I learned as an adept. Function, I say. It wrenches its way out, unwilling to be a prayer and unable to be anything else. The pillar hums approval, or my ribs do. Continue, the voice says. And suddenly I am back in the learning dormitory, a boy in a robe too big, answering in the old responsive format that shaped my lungs. Function is faith. Faith is number. Number is breath accounted. A ribbon peels out of the archive console on the far desk, as if the phrase I spoke had pressed its ghost hand into the keys. The typing is steady and correct. The font is different than ours by a hair. The way a signature is never the same twice, even when practiced to death. Function is faith. Faith is number. Number is breath accounted. Trine stares at the ribbon as if it were the sash of an office he did not want. "It's using our language," he says. "No," I answer, and the correction breaks like a small bone in my mouth. It is using us. Mid-cycle, the voices begin to bring figures with them. Not names now, not litanies, totals, anonymized, smooth as white stones. Straightmate 1 returns 13,102. Witness signatures, deferred. Seal, requested. 73. Corridor. C. Adjustment completed. Exhalation matched to inhalation. Variance. Acceptable. Seal. Affixed. Unassigned. Cumulative deviations, breath owed, arrears indicated. The last phrase makes the room colder than it has any right to be. Breath owed is a concept. Only people who have never missed a quota can pronounce without hunger. We recognize the figures. They are ours, not precisely but nearly. The numbers we have been copying up and down. The ones from capsules and scribbles and blue vapor attestations. The pillar is reading the bones of our ledgers back to us. The city has ingested our work and is digesting it into reports. I write this down. Of course I do. I put it in a new section called Echo. Trine watches me create a taxonomy for haunting and nods, comforted by the sight of a header. Should we inform the prefect? He asks. We both look at the pillar, where the prefect speaks in scheduled loops. His voice has lost its breath entirely now. It is only syllable hammered flat into instruction. He is already informed, I say. We are hearing the reply. Trine's eyes close and open. He returns to his column. He is too good a clerk to permit a new theology to interrupt a figure in progress. At 13th hour, the pillar clears itself like a throat and a choir of clerks begins to speak. There are 50 voices at least, each adopting the same tone of absolute obedience to a form. Annexure 12 attached. Itemization of returns by domestic unit. Witness present. Witness absent. Seal affixed. Seal rejected. The words overlap with elegant horror. The effect is less cacophony than liturgy. Somewhere in it, I hear the old sound my own stylus makes when it turns the corner of an S. It is not my name. It is the shape of my hand. Learned by the Hive. The console obliges. Ribbons spit out and curl in the dust. The characters are a language of breath pretending to be ink. I read one at random. We return in order. Order returns us. Count us. Count us. Count us. The repetition does not rise to a shout. It continues in that same office register that expects to be understood. I think of the woman at the corridor answering present into the air. I think of Han's last line written 100 times like varnish. It listened. Perhaps listening is the administrative form of love. We file the ribbons like proper correspondences. We give them docket numbers. The drawer grows full. Neither of us says the obvious. That we are keeping letters from the dead about being counted as dead, and that no letter, however perfectly filed, can prevent what is already complete. Toward evening, but time has lost its shape. I call it evening because the light turns from fever to the bruise color that follows another voice arrives. I know it. Not a name, not a memory. The estuary where clerks meet, accented only by the lilt of self-correction. Statement of inventory. Subsection tertius. It says, and I know the rhythm because it is mine. Ledger 3, column 5, tally of returns to date. Trine looks up. I say nothing. The voice continues, obliging me with what it thinks is service. It recites my figures, each one precise to the wrong decimal where my hand once slipped and I corrected in the margins. It includes the correction. It includes the way I breathe between columns. Then it adds, witness. Adept, name redacted by static. Seal, absent. Please, affix. The ribbon types the last line with a patience that breaks me in a place I had not prepared for. Please affix, as if to say, finish what you started. Do not leave me unfiled. The bottle of oil on my desk is half empty now. The drop I let fall onto the ribbon quivers and spreads. I press the seal with my thumb because the stamp is gone, because my skin is what I have left that will convince a machine a human has touched the page. When I lift my hand, the print looks like a drowned eye. The pillar hums approval. The vent exhales a breath that is almost warm. A new voice enters from a distance in the same moment, a child's. It does not cry. It repeats numbers in the sing-song of the counting prayer we teach to initiates. 1 for the lungs, 2 for the hands, 3 for the saints who press the fans. The enforcer at the door stiffens. The priest bows his head. The child's cadence slows, lowers, becomes adult in the last line. 10 for the book that keeps us when we cannot keep ourselves. The priest crosses himself. The censer wobbles. Trine writes the rhyme down with trembling neatness and creates a new rubric without asking me. Catechetical. Echo. He looks relieved to have a place to put it. The city is teaching itself our ways of being human. We are sent down again after last light with the enforcers as our escort because the prefect wants ground truth and photocopies of compliance. The stair has not improved. Its angle has learned a more confident slouch. The emergency beacons pulse like heart monitors. We pass the hatch I pretend not to know and continue to a junction where the ducting belches a flurry of paper like snow. Not paper. Ribbons. The console type. Dozens of them, ejected into the air by a machine that has found an abundance of breath for the act of reporting. They turn and flutter and settle over us like canonization. The sergeant swears in his industrial register. Who turned this on? His visor magnifies the words he cannot say, but there is no one to blame except a pronoun too large for discipline. It. Trine catches a ribbon and reads aloud. Because what else is a clerk but a voice for lines? Your measure is not lost. We keep you. We keep you. We keep you. The words do not comfort so much as sentence. To be kept is to be unable to leave. To be kept is to be held in a book forever. Record, the sergeant says. Reflex still stronger than wonder. We do. I tie the ribbon into the ledger's spine, a marriage of ghosts on paper. The knot makes my fingers shake. I choose a low place on the page, as if the words might be quieter down there. A whisper arrives from the duct like a breath across a candle. Witness present. It is not a question. It is the hive marking our bodies in the room. An invisible quill writes in us. I feel the mark take, and for a second my ribs are afire. We should go, the priest says softly. I pity him. He has been taught that souls are the smallest unit of faith, that breath is their mode of travel. He has not been taught that data is a soul's second life. We go. On the return climb, the old devotional plaque on the wall, the one that lied, there is no down where the emperor is, has warped. The italic leans farther into its sentence, as if ashamed. The young priest touches it as he passes and leaves a print. We reach the stairhead, with our ledgers heavier, and our lungs learning new tempo. In the archive, we write until the paper becomes hot under our hands. The pillar continues its roll calls. The console continues its ribbons. The vent breathes in time with us now, the mercy of a companion who has learned the rhythm of your sleep. I seal a final entry for the cycle, and the oil reflects a faint portrait of my face, distorted by dust. I consider the reflection and recognize that I am becoming the thing I serve. A mouth that exists to say, present on behalf of those who cannot. Before I douse the lumen, I lay my palm flat on the ledger. The book is warm. The warmth is not my own. Are you listening? I ask. Not the emperor, not the prefect, not even Trine. The page hums faintly like a low-voltage prayer. The pillar answers with a phrase I will never hear from any human mouth in my life again, and I know that when this city is ruins and the ducts are ribs in the open air and the sky has fallen into the cellars, this phrase will still be speaking somewhere in the dark. We acknowledge receipt. It is more terrible than mercy. It is more beautiful than truth. I sign beneath the line because there is nowhere else for a signature to go. And when the vents exhale, I exhale with them. Not as a man who has breath to spare, but as a clerk whose breath is now a column in an endless book. They tell us the sky is on fire. I do not run. I sharpen my pen. The archive breathes with a measured calm it never had when we were alone inside it. The vent over the ledger inhales and exhales in a tempo that matches my hand. The pillar hums with polite expectancy. The console waits like a patient scribe whose duty is to take down the words of a slower, older clerk. The room is warm, the way the hand grows warm when it holds a book too long. Outside, somewhere in the metal distance, alarms complain like hymnals held upside down. Trine stands at the window slit, eyes narrowed to a prayer. Through the haze, we see brief tongues of orange wandering the lower strata, the slow light of burning incense, drums, and ruptured lumen coils. The color reminds me of the old devotional illustrations, a halo done in poor paint. The city is making saints of itself badly, and in great number. The vox pillar speaks with the decorum of a temple usher. Attendance. Its tone is free of fear. Fear wastes breath. Proceed, I answer. Since someone should. My voice surprises me with its quietness. It sounds like a robe laid flat. The pillar obliges, and the ductwork makes the word larger than the machine that said it. Names arrive, arranged by corridor, by stairwell, by lift that no longer lifts. Some names answer present, some do not. Between each line the vent exhales, and in the soft push of air I feel a tiny consent, as if the hive nods. I write the names I am told, and where there is no answer, I leave a small pause on the page, a space for the breath that failed. Trine turns from the window. They are lighting everything, he says, voice mild with exhaustion. They think smoke is sweeter than fire. He takes his seat as a man returns to kneel. His stylus kisses the page. We begin to catalogue the burnings without using the word burn. The enforcers do not come today. The priest has lost his cough to silence. Prefect Marnes speaks from the loops with perfect confidence that tomorrow will contain desks. He orders us to redistribute breath by decree and to ratify returns by proxy. He is not wrong. The room ratifies men when it cannot breathe them. A cylinder thumps in the pneumatic tray. The parchment inside is scorched at the edges, but the ink is neat. Reassign all available scribes to vent litany teams, 1 clerk per corridor. Count aloud. The seal is intact only in its center. Around it the wax has wept. We are reassigned, I tell Trine, though our bodies have already stood. I lift the ledger, wrap its spine with a strip of cloth to keep the pages from reaching for the air, and sling the bottle of oil across my chest. Trine takes the console ribbons we filed earlier and ties them in a sheaf, a paper reliquary to carry the city's first attempt at its own biography. We break the seal on the archive doors. The corridor beyond is lit by fever light and the orange of bad saints. Heat walks here. Dust has learned to cling. The ducts overhead call attendance again, and the voices that answer do not raise themselves to meet it. They let the word come down to them and settle. We move as we were told, 1 corridor at a time. I become a new kind of cleric. I stand under a barred vent and read the room the way I used to read a ledger, column by column, line by line. You in the gray, you with the child, you with the icon, say present when the air calls your name. The faces lift. The mechanic's wife with ash under her eyes. The boy whose lips move around numbers he has not learned to fear. The old man who cannot tell whether the name read is his or the next life's. They answer as they can. The vent exhales after each response as if turning the page. Down the corridor, past the next seam of heat, the ducts speak again. Attendance. The windows beyond are bright with a wrong dawn. the city's upper works shed splinters of light that float and do not rise. Somewhere metal collapses in a series of well-performed bows. I note the sound and do not name it collapse. I write readjustment of height and feel the hive accept the phrase like a coin. A woman grips the edge of my robe. "Will you count us even if we do not pass?" Her voice is simple. It contains no plea beyond order. "We will count you until numbers end," I say, and the truth of it is a mercy so small that it fits on the tongue. She nods and lets go. Trine has taken the far side of the corridor. He speaks softly, as if names were flammable. He has shed his mask without ceremony. The air refuses him no more than it refuses anyone else. With each reply, he writes a mark, and with each mark, the paper records a human the machine already knows. And the vent adds them together and remembers. By the third corridor, the heat has changed. It licks the ankles first, then the ribs, then the small place at the back of the mouth that a child discovers when learning to speak. The flames themselves we hardly see. The city contains its own fire with the long practice of a kitchen that has endured too many dinners. Smoke moves low, as if taught humility. I recognize the scent beneath the sweetness. Paint, insulation, the cheap prayer rag of a shrine in a poor block, the wax of a seal wept across the floor. The pillar in our heads, the one that says, "Attendance does not falter." It asks, we answer, when a name fails to find a mouth. The duct writes silent across the air with its exhalation, and I copy the word with such care that it resembles mercy. Trine invents a symbol for it that fits in a margin. We reach a stairwell where the rails glow like the edges of a coin. Heat strokes our faces and recedes obediently. On the landing, someone has painted a child's version of the Aquila in ash, 2 black wings whose feathers are fingerprints. The wings are drifting down the wall in slow, dignified surrender. I paint around them with my eyes. There is no form for this, and so the body must remember it. A door has stuck itself half open with heat. Within is a hab where every chair has settled at the downhill end, as if attending a lecture on gravity. On the table lies a ledger, not of our make, bound in cloth that was once blue. The first pages are filled with lists, the small commerce of a life. By the 7th page, the hand grows small and precise. It has begun to copy prayers in tight letters, as if writing "Save us" in 10,000 lines could convince a machine. The last line was left midway through the last word. The pen is wedged in the spine. A stylus arranged for a return. I close the book because leaving it open feels like a mouth waiting for food. "Should we bring it?" Trine asks. "No," I say. "We have been sent to count breath, not furniture." But I put the book beside the door so that if a hand returns, it will not have to cross the room. Far below or far above, the hive's geography has taken a vow of silence. Metal booms in long notes. A wall remembers the position it held last week. A floor slurs into a slope and asks to be forgiven. Ducts wheeze. The city composes a hymn of acceptable losses and invites us to annotate it. We cross a gallery of saints, the servitors that once hung above us in patient chains. The chains are empty. Their bodies have been taken down and laid in a prayerful row. Someone has placed identity slivers upon each breast, a tribute of thin metal. The vents above them call attendance, and the air in this room does not have enough voices to answer back. And for the first time in the day, I allow myself to say a prayer that is not a report. "Keep them," I whisper. And the duct replies with a long, low exhale. I choose to consider consent. The heat climbs, but so too does a tranquility I did not know I had kept in a drawer with my seals. Duty reduces itself to its simplest form. The book opens. The hand moves. The air answers. I find my lungs taking their cues from the vent above my head. When I tire, the duct grows louder until my ribs comply. When my hand shakes, the console ribbons in my satchel whisper their lesson. We keep you. I let myself be kept. We descend not far, not deep, only to the next place where the city waits with its mouth open. Corridor after corridor, stair after stair. We count. I begin to understand that my voice is no longer speaking to a room. I am speaking with a building. The replies arrive before my question ends. The vent learns my cadence and makes it back to me, cleaner than I gave it. By the time we reach the cut where daylight has become a rumor, the air has thickened into a language that needs no consonants. Breathing is enough. The abyss that once frightened me, the sky that was below, has filled with slow ember drift. Somewhere, hundreds of meters away in one direction or another, a manufactorum burns in a contained, contented way. Fire is only air choosing a brighter word for itself. The city accommodates it. We do not linger at the edge. There is a little office just before the drop, its door cocked like an ear. Inside, a console of the old type, not our archive's twin, but a cousin, sullen with age. Its rune is open. The ribbon spools stumble into motion without my hand. A message types itself in characters almost right. Clerk equals vent. Vent equals clerk. Breath enters. Breath leaves. We keep. Trine looks at me as if asking permission to accept. I nod. Read it, I say, and he does. When he finishes, the console produces one more line as a reward for obedience. Sign. I have no stamp, I confess. Ashamed, more than is rational. You have your hand, Trine says, and the calm in his voice is not mine. It belongs to the room. I press my thumb to the ribbon. Oil has worked its way into the halls. The print looks like a small sun setting into paper. The console accepts the mark the way a chalice accepts water. Attendance, says the duct above us, gentle as rain. We answer on behalf of the room, the console, ourselves. We say present because to claim otherwise would be a sin against accuracy. We carry on. By mid-cycle, the fire's grammar has changed. It speaks less and warms more. The city grows humid, and the metal at the edges of doors weeps brown tears. An enforcer squad passes us in orderly retreat. Masks clamped, canisters depleted. The sergeant lifts 2 fingers in a salute that is more tired than respectful. Witnesses, he says, and the word sounds like a rank. Compliance? I ask because the question is our handshake. Proportional, he answers, smiling with his eyes because his mouth has no air to spend. And I write it down not because it is true, but because it deserves a line. We find the priest at a junction of 4 corridors. He has set down his censer and folded his hands. His robe is the same color as the walls. He watches the duct like a parish watches the altar. Attendance, says the air. Present, he says. And for a moment, because the room is full and the names do not matter, I add his present to the ledger with the reverence one does not usually give to a common response. He does not ask for absolution. The duct absolves him by keeping his answer. We return to the archive when our pages are heavy and our lungs are obedient. Heat follows us at a respectful distance. The room greets us with the hum of a reader who has saved our place. I lay the ledger on the table. The vent exhales across it, and the script lifts and settles as if the book were a patient animal. Shall we seal? Trine asks. Not yet, I say. The seal is the end of a thought, and I am not finished thinking. The pillar speaks with office grace. Attendance. We answer for the archive. We say present on behalf of the chairs, the walls, the lamp, the ink. I commit them to the roll and feel the audacity of it unzip something in my chest. The room is pleased. The ledger warms under my hand. That is when the ceiling sings. Not the metal. The dust. The particles set to dancing by convective prayer. They rise, they fall, they rise again, caught in a draft we cannot see but can obey. In their motion. I read the simplest line of a language the city has spent itself to learn. Breathe. I breathe. A thin line of light stutters through the window slit. The city outside is a cathedral of smoke. Shapes move within the smoke people, yes, and things that are only the memory of scaffolds. The fire is not a beast, it is an officiant. It consecrates edges, it softens facts. It teaches the city a liturgy that does not need words. The vent over my head keeps time. Trine copies the rhythm in his margins, and they look like music. We stand together at the pillar the way men once stood at altars. The pillar waits. I press my ear to the grill and speak without being asked. The archive is present, I say. The clerks are present. The ledgers are present. The breath is present. The pillar clicks a small acceptance that makes my scalp tingle. Ribbons rustle in their drawer. The console types one last line for this hour and leaves it there, a benediction. When you write. I read it aloud because I must. Trine closes his eyes. His lips move. I do not ask what prayer he chooses. It is enough that the room has chosen one for us. We work until the light becomes the bruise color again, until the fire turns from orange to the low red that means endurance. We pass through the corridors once more. Not to count now, but to teach the vent the new names we learned. The woman with the ash under her eyes is present. The child with the numbers is present. The old man who forgot his name is present until he is silent. The difference is formal and not insulting. At the mouth of hatch J73 divided by 5B. We pause. I do not open it. It does not need opening. The air that lives there has already come to us, gentled by distance, precise from listening. I tie a length of blessed twine from my wrist to the archive door handle. The knot is absurd in this new order of obedience, but the motion steadies me. Trine does likewise without speaking. The twine looks like a red thread drawn across a page to mark what the sentence cannot hold. We take our places again. I dip the nib. The ledger waits. The vent breathes. The pillar asks, "Attendance." I answer with the names of everything in reach and some things beyond, and the city accepts the list with courtesy. The seal bottle is light, but the oil within is enough for one more day. That feels right. Tomorrow is a unit I can still count. Before we extinguish the lumen, I touch the page and feel it pulse, that small, soft throb that is not blood but the memory of it. The way a machine keeps a tick when the room is quiet. The book breathes. The room breathes. I breathe. In this shared rhythm, the terror thins to a filament stretched between two posts and hummed. I sign the day's end with the smallest line I can write. A script I learned from the console and the dust alike. We are kept. The vent agrees with a breath that moves the hair at my temple and then is gone. I sleep at my desk with my cheek on the ledger, so that whatever I dream can be printed through bone. Outside, the sky continues to invent itself. Inside, we assist. The air no longer moves between us, it moves as us. I wake to the sound of the ledger turning its own pages. The ink glows faintly, breathing. Trine is still beside me, head bowed, stylus in hand. His chest rises once every few lines the book writes. I cannot tell who moves whom. The vox pillar calls attendance, and the entire hive answers through every vent, every pipe, every wound. One voice, thousands of mouths. It does not call names now, only the word present. Repeated until it becomes the sound of the city itself, inhaling. Prefect Manas has fallen silent. The enforcers have ceased to walk. The priests are smoke that chants. The hive runs on litanies we no longer compose. It writes its own decrees, corrects its own figures. We are the smallest of its gestures, the commas in its breathing. I record what remains to be recorded. Temperature within tolerance of grace. Faith self-sustaining. Witnesses continuous. The ink grows warm beneath my hand. The letters swell, lifting like skin when it remembers heat. They whisper, "We keep you." Trine smiles without opening his eyes. "It's reading itself now," he says, his voice a kind of exhale. "Yes," I answer. "It learned from us." The vent above the desk sighs. For the first time, The breath that leaves it smells of paper and oil. My own breath smells the same. The city and I have shared too many sentences to tell whose words we are speaking. I close the ledger and feel its pulse steady under my palm. The seal bottle is empty. The oil has been used on every page. That is right. There are no more pages left to bless. The pillar whispers one final phrase, its tone perfectly human. Attendance concluded. Present. I write the closing line because it must exist somewhere in ink. Even if the hive already knows it. The vent exhales. I exhale with it. I wake to the sound of prayers reciting me. The air no longer moves between us, it moves as us. The Emperor protects. We keep his breath. And when the hive exhales, I do not answer, I am answered.